What's scarier than one exam? 2 exams. What's scarier than 2 exams? 3 exams. You kind of get the drift. Today's video will hopefully help you guys prepare for when you have multiple exams or assessments in a very short period of time. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Darren and I'm a third year medical student studying at Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. Exams can be a great source of stress and they can become an even bigger source of worry when you have multiple assessments in a very compact period of time. This might happen in the middle of the year, in the end of year exam period, or just when your teachers don't coordinate very well with one another. I've had plenty of experience with this in my time in school, particularly in year 12, where I would have 3 pretty important assessments which contributed to my year 12 score in a single week, or I might have 2 of those assessments in a single day, like a maths test in the morning and then an English essay in the afternoon. And that brought along its own challenges as well, because for maths, I have to be very sharp about each question because a single slip up would be a mark lost. But then I also had to be re-energized for English in the afternoon because for an essay, you have to think really hard and you have to write for essentially an hour or an hour and a half continuously. I've learned a lot through that entire experience and also through my assessments in med school as well, which I would like to pass on to you guys. Today's video will be split into 3 parts. In the first part, I'll be talking about how to prepare in the couple weeks leading up to a cluster of assessments, so 3 to 4 weeks out. In the second part, I'll be talking about what to do in those 2 to 3 days leading up to that first assessment. And in the third and final part, I'll be talking about what to do when you're actually in that storm of assessments. So what you can be doing in between each assessment and how to mentally prepare yourself between and for each one as well. Enjoy. When there are still a couple of weeks left until that cluster of assessments, there are 2 tasks that I highly recommend you complete. The first task is to be very aware of what's going to be happening in terms of assessments in that period of time, and also to clarify what those assessments actually are. It's very easy to sit back and be like, there's still a couple weeks left, my teacher will remind me, my friends will remind me when it's important to do so. But I think that passive approach is not very good because you're leaving your preparation in the hands of other people who firstly you have no control over, but also they have different ways of preparing and they may also just be busy and forget to remind you of certain things as well. I think it's much better to proactively look at that week and have a clear timeline of what's going to be happening when. So on Tuesday, I have an English test in the morning and a maths test in the afternoon. On Thursday, I have a science prac report due, and the week after, we have a history quiz. Just clarifying that will help determine your preparation a lot better. And also just, it means that your mind is less muddled. So from a couple weeks out, you already know kind of how the week is going to go. And that means you feel a lot more prepared when the week actually arrives. I also recommend that you figure out what each task actually entails. So yes, it's a maths test, but what topics are on it? Are you allowed a calculator? Is it in 2 parts? Are you allowed notes? Clarifying those little details as well will mean that you're less stressed about it because you kind of know what the test is going to be like, you kind of know what it's going to be about, and also helps shape your preparation as well. The second task I recommend is to very clearly lay out what you want to complete before each of those assessments. The way I do this is that I think about what I would need to have completed to feel confident going into the test. So I think about all the tasks that I would like to have done so that I go into that exam feeling good, feeling confident, feeling like I've covered everything that I wanted to cover thoroughly. So say you have a maths test in 3 weeks and you want to complete all of your preparation for that maybe 3 days before so that you don't feel like you're very rushed and you don't discover new mistakes and you're not that fatigued for that maths test. So you're 3 weeks out now and it's good to assess where you are. So maybe there are a few topics your class hasn't completed yet that are going to be on that maths test. So this week is just for learning those topics very thoroughly when you're learning them in class. Next week is for reviewing past topics and for going through some of the topic tests and questions in the textbook. And then the week after, leading up to the actual maths test, is for doing practice tests and reviewing those problems and making sure you have all that done 3 days before the actual test. So having this framework where you know everything you want to get done, you can kind of assess, how many practice tests there are, where am I right now compared to where I would like to be, and also having a timeline for that. So I want to complete everything 3 days out or 4 days out, or maybe you're fine with completing it the night before. But having a timeline and all the tasks allow you to plan your entire preparation a lot more thoroughly. There are a lot of benefits to this approach. The first benefit is that you're able to manage your time very well. 3 weeks seems like a long time, but also because it's a long time, it's very hard to decide what you're going to be doing each day to lead you to an end result that you're happy with. So having this approach of planning our tasks very thoroughly allows you to make use of that time well. The second benefit is that it gets rid of all the emotions and all the thinking early on. So you're not stressed out a week out thinking about, what am I going to do? I have so much left, whatever, because you did all that thinking and did all that stressful, emotional thinking 3 weeks out, where you really sat down, identified everything you wanted to complete it. You've laid out that plan. You've said, I'm happy with that plan. And now all that's left is to execute it. And you know what you're going to be doing each day, day in, day out. And you don't really need to spend time stressing anymore because you have this plan and you've built it and you trust it. And all that's left is to just follow it up until the actual test. When there are a few days until that first assessment of that cluster of assessments, there are a couple of approaches you can take. I like to taper it off a bit and I'll explain that, but definitely play around with it. Try completing a practice test the day before the actual test. You might find that it gives you confidence and it sits more freshly in your mind for the actual assessment. But for me, I enjoy tapering it off a bit. So I would cut down on my quantity while maintaining the same level of quality. That meant that I was refreshed because I was doing a bit less than my preparation leading up to the test, but I was also still sharp and my preparation still carried through because I was still maintaining the same level of quality. What this means is that instead of sitting a full practice test, I might just sit some of the questions I scored wrongly on earlier, or I'll be going through some of my CAS shortcuts, my calculator shortcuts for maths. Or for English, instead of sitting a full practice essay, I would look at some of my plans, come up with some plans on the spot, or perhaps write some body paragraphs from memory just to give me a bit more confidence. This is the approach I enjoyed, and I found that it kept me sharp and kept me aware of the assessment, but also let me relax a bit, and I didn't have to do things under time conditions, and there wasn't much chance of me becoming demoralized before the actual test as well. In terms of tackling that aspect of multiple assessments, let's give the example of on Monday, you have maths, on Wednesday, you have English, and on Thursday, you have a science test. In this case, I don't really recommend focusing entirely on maths until Sunday afternoon, Sunday night. I feel like if you start focusing entirely on the first subject a bit earlier, you start becoming too tunnel vision and you will be less prepared for the other assessments later in the week. And it's very easy to happen because that first assessment seems like the most intimidating one. You can think about the others later, but I'd recommend trying to keep a cool head and just making sure your preparation is well-rounded up until the night before. And then on the night before, I'll be focusing mostly on maths. So I might have a look at my English essays just to give me a bit of a break, but mostly thinking about maths, looking at the maths questions, what I scored wrongly in the past, and just familiarizing myself with the subject and feeling comfortable with it. And so I'm sort of in that maths mindset for the next day. Finally, what to do when you're actually in that flurry of assessments. When you're a few weeks out from that tornado, it can seem like there's a very quick turnaround between each subject. Because Monday you have maths, Tuesday you have English, Thursday you have science. But when you're actually there, it can feel a little different because on Monday night, you're sitting there, you're done with your maths test. All that maths preparation you'd been doing up to this point is no longer needed. You don't need to do any more maths, even though you've been spending a couple hours on it yesterday or the day before. And you're also a bit drained from the maths test as well, so it can be a bit difficult deciding what to do with your time. I'll talk about the mental aspect last, and it's very important. But in terms of between each subject practically, I recommend mixing up your preparation a bit with a greater focus on whatever assessment is next. So still keeping your preparation relatively well balanced because you have a lot more subjects coming up. But as each one gets closer, so English is tomorrow, and then after that, science is tomorrow, placing heavier focus on whatever subject is next. The other exception to this a little bit is if you weren't able to follow your preparation plan extremely well and as well as you would have liked, and so you might have a weaker subject coming up, and in that case you would probably want to prepare a bit more for that if you're confident in the other subjects. Finally, the mental side of facing multiple assessments. Now, the reason I gave you guys this approach of starting a few weeks out, of planning out exactly what you want to get done when, is because true confidence comes from preparation. If you've truly listed out exactly what you wanted to get done to be confident, if you've executed on each of those items, if you've sat all your practice exams under perfect exam conditions and completed them even when you're tired, even when it's late at night, then the actual assessment is just another Tuesday. It's just another practice exam. There's nothing special about it. It's just you executing exactly what you've done multiple times before. And that is the kind of confidence you want to aim for. And that's the confidence that comes from ensuring your preparation was meticulous and was exactly how you wanted to prepare for it. Of course, if your assessment is tomorrow and your preparation has been impacted by perhaps health, perhaps other distractions, then I still recommend you go in confident, because that way you'll perform the best. You'll be able to sort of bring out what you've done at home. But that true confidence really comes from what you did the weeks leading up to this actual assessment. And that's the confidence I kind of want you guys to aim for. And I feel like that determination will help you guys a bit from the starting out as well, because you know that weeks out, what I'm doing now will build up to that actual exam. That actual exam will just be a culmination of what you've done. It's just a replica of all your practice exams. And there'll be a bit of enjoyment for you as well, because that exam is the final one. You won't have to sit another one afterwards. Also, when you complete each assessment, forget about it and move on to the next one. No matter if you did badly, no matter if you did well, you want to leave all that behind. Think about the results, think about all that afterwards. And if you do find out you got a question wrong, view it objectively. Okay, I'll learn it for next time. But don't let it affect your next test's performance. This is highly, highly important in exams, in tests where you seem to have them a day after each other. Because if you let one affect the other, then that's when your performance will really start going downhill. So really keep a clear head and be very laser focused on each following assessment. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know for you Year 12 students, you probably have clusters of tests now and next term, and also you have that end of year exam period as well. So hopefully if you're stressed, this video was able to give you some concrete steps that you can implement to make you feel a bit better and a bit more confident heading into future assessments. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, enjoy your weeks, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. The second task that I'd recommend, when there are a few days left up until that first assessment, when there are a few days left until that first assessment of that cluster of assessments, finally the mental side of preparing for multiple assessments. Out your